With me in the studio this hour, dperry is an international affairs analyst and the author of the Ask Questions Later newsletter. Good to see you, Dan. Our senior Middle East correspondent, Ariel is with us as well. Dperry is with us in the studio. I don't know about you, Dan, but I'm really struck by a paradox between the authenticity of the reunions, the family reunions we've seen here in Israel today, and what's going on tonight in Sharm-el-Sheikh.
You mean the fakery?
Your words, not mine.
I don't think.
But it's a lot of show.
Only one struck by it, but there is a lot of contradiction and paradox to this day, including about let's say the theatrality of this conference. Because on one hand, it's easy to portray this as the most fictitious regional and global historic peace conference that ever existed in the history of humankind, because the peace presumably involves Israel. Israel was disinvited by some of the people present, apparently, if reports be believed, precisely because they don't want peace with Israel. That even applies, apparently, to Turkey that has relations with Israel. So it looks like peace 2025...
And was until recently Israel's biggest trading partner, I believe.
Well, yeah, and continues to trade, by the way.
Yeah.
Putting aside Erdogan's weirdness, it doesn't seem to be regional peace, never mind the Trumpian fictions about 3,000 years. I guess he's talking about the Babylonian exile. But on the other hand, it's not false at all that today, according to the president of the U.S., brought to an end what was the most devastating Arab-Israeli war in terms of loss of life on both sides combined. And really, even on the Israeli side, the trauma of October 7th is, up there with any trauma Israelis have ever known. And the fact that it's being brought to an end is not irrelevant. So this summit, if I have to read into it what it means, because it clearly doesn't mean Israel's at peace with the Middle East, is that the commitment, the political commitment to the narrative that this war in Gaza is over is maximal. It's very difficult to walk back this situation where you drag Starmer and Macron and Azerbaijan and I mean, it's unbelievable what they've done
here. Just 2 weeks after since the UN General Assembly, it seems as though something similar is happening again.
I don't see
but at least the pressure's not all on Israel.
I don't see how they let the war restart, and that I have to hope that means that Qatar and Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Turkey, who are members of honor on the stage here, will understand that they can't let Hamas get away with watering down the other 20 points. It can't
be another Hezbollah in Lebanon.
It must mean a total commitment to the disarmament of Hamas, so that Israel is not left having to tolerate a Hezbollah scenario in Gaza, and Trump would be left with significant egg on his Nobel aspirational face.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, call it peace, 3,000 years, whatever. But first, I think his key concern, and he really spoke about it today in terms that showed he was genuinely concerned, he had to stop what he saw was this, growing wave of this anti-Israel rhetoric and essentially put a stop to it and reverse to it. The other thing that he also said today in the Israeli Knesset is that he expects the Abraham Accords to continue. And he also said it in a way that, I want it quick and don't put any obstacles. And that was kind of a message to the countries here. So I actually think he's going to put much more of his weight than we expect about getting at least some of the countries that are sitting there. And the more he's putting countries in there, the more he's actually creating a kind of just peer pressure. And everyone's around the table.
Nobody wants to be the one to let down the team, so to speak.
Exactly. Yeah. And he keeps on talking about it. Everyone wants in. Everyone wants in. And I think he wants to build this peer pressure that, again, he saw the peer pressure build against Israel. And now he wants to build the peer pressure in the opposite direction.
Yeah, you're right. He did talk about that in his speech, how, Israel could not continue fighting because the international pressure upon it was just becoming too much to bear.
The world is a big place and you can't fight all the world at once. I agree they not, but I have a nuance of a difference. I think he's also putting pressure on Israel to not get in the way. For example, no more settlement while in West Bank until I resolve this. Don't create obstacles, don't create provocations. I'm going to get you a really good deal. And this Trumpian method is really interesting because it seems dishonest. You can't declare a war is over before it's over. It's ridiculous. I'm not sure it's ever been tried by a major power in history, except he does this, and then there's everyone to call him a liar, and no one wants to because in most cases they have something to gain by going along with what is a fiction and turning it into a nonfiction. Fascinating.
Yeah, and I think also part of Israel's growing isolation has not just been because of the war, but it has been this very well-funded campaign by Qatar and also, the Chinese algorithms, Iran as well.
Russia,
too. That's being handled, too. Like, the algorithms are beginning to change, the ownership of TikTok. Al Jazeera is clearly under the pressure to begin to change. So you really see kind of handling of the various elements that created this very dangerous and vicious anti-Israel, I would argue, anti-Semitic momentum that was getting very dangerous. And I think there is an effort here to kind of turn that momentum. And you're absolutely right. He has this odd ability to kind of speak things into reality.
Yes.
And again, he's the president of the United States.
Manifesting.
He's not some crazy, so that he brings the might of America behind those words, and it has effect.
I've also been noticing the global coverage of this. Truly remarkable. For example,
this summit?
Not just
this hostage release.
Witkoff's speech at Hostage Square. It was globally televised, and it was a pro-Israel festival. And there was no cynicism that I saw on French TV, on British TV. It's as if the world sort of agreed to do an azimuth shift and walk away from the woke left fiction that Israel's committing genocide.
Well, some of the more
to a degree, even on Arab television.
Some of the more hostile actors towards Israel now are not in the Middle East, they're actually in Europe. Yeah. I mean, when you've seen the marching in London, right after 2 Jews were murdered in a synagogue in Manchester, out they came onto the streets baying for blood.
Laura,
I mean, there's a very worrying situation.
Look, I lived in Britain for 7 years, but less than you, presumably.
I grew up there.
But I don't think the British people buy this.
No,
this is a far left mob, and a lot of the Muslim community, and it's of course.
And I've just been in Greece actually, and I've seen the graffiti. It's obviously coordinated.
And you know what? Just like woke excess, helped Trump get elected in the U.S. This anti-Israel obsession
there'll be a backlash,
is helping the far right in the UK and also in other places in Europe, certainly Holland.
A word on UNRWA, if you want, the UN Agency for Refugees, this special agency dedicated to the descendants of Palestinian refugees. We can see Guterres is there. Do you think we're going to see any change at UNRWA?
I hope so. Really, I mean, for a lot of people, it seems as if I obsess about like a small agency that's doing good in the world. Very few people understand that UNRWA is the central fueling station of what I've come to call Palestinianism, this singular obsession with the non-existence of sovereign Jews, with the non-existence of a Jewish state. UNRWA is essentially the mechanism by which every generation of Arabs in Gaza and the West Bank has been raised to believe that it is their noble goal to liberate Palestine from the river to the sea. If UNRWA is allowed to stay in any capacity, in any way, to keep telling Arabs in Gaza that they are Palestine refugees into the 5th generation, that people have a right to settle in Israel in the name of a right of return, which again is not a right, they don't have it. If UNRWA is allowed to stay in any way, shape or form, all the beautiful ideas, just like they did last time, are going to again come to naught and literally blow up. So this time around, and this is my message, not just abroad, but this is my message to the Israeli government. Yes, Israel's going to say yes to all the Abraham Accord plans that are going to be put on the table. But unlike last time, we can't be complacent and think, oh, the Palestinian issue is now a side issue. We need to understand that in parallel to the Abraham Accords, we need to dismantle Palestinianism as an ideology so that it is replaced with a constructive ideology that wants to live next to the Jewish state rather than on its ruins.
Okay, Dan?
I can't disagree with that. Of course, I agree that it's ridiculous that you have, 4th generation refugees. And when I was in charge of AP in the Middle East, I changed that as best I could to descendants of refugees at the very least, because there are not 6 million refugees in this place, and there's almost there are no refugees in Gaza by the standard definition of refugees. Of course, by certain, not all UN departments, you can, in the exclusive case of Palestinians, have 20th generation refugees. But as for UNRWA, yeah, a lot of problems there, without a shadow of a doubt. But if they are to be dismantled or to be kept away from Gaza or any part of the Middle East on the strength of your arguments, the certain functions that they played badly in a distorted way. With education, for example, they had schools. They have to be replaced. You can't just eliminate UNRWA. You have to replace their functions.
But is there any sign that is happening? And is there any sign
that
that's an easy one?
No, fair enough. But here's a difficult one. Getting the Palestinians to forgo this frustratingly absurd narrative that they're so invested in, that their homes in the Galilee are still homes and they're theirs. A narrative that doesn't exist for Germans kicked out of all over Eastern Europe after World War II, for Hindus and Muslims in South Asia. No one else acts this way. To get them to give it up is not going to happen because Israel demands it. It's going to happen, if it ever happens, as a phased process that has to be accompanied by Israeli concessions, which are actually doing themselves a favor in the context of a process to partition from the Palestinians and give them some version of sovereignty on at least part of the land. If Israel doesn't give them anything, this will simply not happen.
Well, the Palestine refugees basically have been deprived of the message the tens of millions of refugees were given in the wake of empires disappearing and new states being established, which is it's tough, it's tragic, and it's over.
And it's very common if you look around the world.
It's not even
Pakistani,
that tragic. The Germans kicked out of the Soviet Union, had to move thousands of miles to a completely, what was at that point to them an alien culture. Exactly. Palestinian refugees from Lud who moved
but the people who are now perpetuating that are
10
in the
miles
West.
Away.
Exactly.
It's being perpetuated in the West. It's not in the Arab countries. The Saudis don't want it in their textbooks.
But I just live in the universe of the possible. I know they're not going to give it up without a very big a reward. And even then, many won't give it up. I just know they won't. But we have to ease them into understanding the fact of. I know they don't have the right. They're not going to give up the. They're not going to give up the insistence and the pretense, and in many cases, the fervent beliefs that they have this right. It's craziness. But given this reality, we have to ease into it, and Israel will have to play its part by ending its part in the oppression of the Palestinians. Fascinating will be the case of Lebanon. Because Lebanon is moving into a zone where they're suddenly acting like a normal, rational government that doesn't want a militia controlling its future.
According to reports,
and the Palestinian refugee nonsense will have to be taken care of there as well.
Ariel, as you can tell us, of course, there are reports that Lebanon and Syria would like a relationship with Israel. We know that this is something President Trump is trying to push. But we heard earlier this week reports possibly about Syria handing over the remains of the Israeli spy, Eli Cohen. Things like this, the kind of thing that Einat Wilf is talking about doing a deal about the people who are there that consider themselves the descendants of Palestinian refugees could also be key to some kind of peace deal moving forward. Do you think that is something that's possible?
Not only is it possible, but it's already being discussed between the sides. Lebanon and Syria are engaged in direct talks for naturalization of Palestinians. We're seeing that this step to disarm the Palestinian camps in Lebanon, it's just the first step. There's numerous steps that that are put in place, or at least are being formulated with regards to the Palestinians. As to the issue of the remains of Eli Cohen, this is something that has already been touted 6 months ago as part of a confidence-building step. But as we are seeing, as we reported earlier, that many of these world leaders that we're seeing on the screen right now said that this is not the time for a handshake with Netanyahu. Even though the war is over, the dust still needs to settle, or at least be removed in part. So that is not yet the case. So the climate isn't in place for such agreements. But there are ongoing talks. The direct channel of communication between Jerusalem and Damascus remains open. To my understanding, the report was kind of a test balloon to test the waters, to see what the climate is. But I think all these test balloons are coming with the same result. This is not yet the time to move forward with agreements with Israel.
Okay, thanks very much, Ariel.